Good afternoon and welcome to our Senior Living Smart Partner webinar. Today we'd like to welcome Roxi with AskRoxi.com. Roxi is passionate about creating healthy workplaces. She has spent much of her career learning the truths and myths about how and why leaders and their organizations succeed or fail. With over 20 years' experience, she has become a sought-after national expert and consultant, helping people build healthy cultures in great organizations. Roxi was a senior administrator at Cornell University for most of her 27 years there and received her master's degree in industrial and labor relations. She has worked as an organizational and leadership consultant for senior living, higher education, nonprofits, and corporations around the country. Roxi has a practical, tell-it-like-it-is insight and has been featured in publications such as Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, Inc., and in her own online leadership course at AskRoxi.com. She also shares more practical advice in her new book, Lead Like It Matters Because It Does, published by McGraw-Hill, which will be released in early October. Please feel free to send your questions or comments, and feel free to tweet questions or comments at GetSLSmart or use hashtag SmartWebinar. Let me turn the webinar over to Roxi, who will give you 8 insights to help you lead like it matters because it does. Roxi, I'll turn the webinar over to you now.
Thanks, Renee, and welcome everyone. I'm really delighted you're here, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you and hearing from you, so I hope you have questions at the end. Let's get started. I really believe we have to take a new and revolutionary approach to leadership. The dusty old paradigms truly will not meet the needs of our current or future workplaces. And we deserve far better than we've gotten for hundreds, if not thousands of years. I think we need a new mantra for leadership. How about this? If you're going to lead other people and mess around in their lives, you must first prove that you have at least the basic skill set and competence to do just that. 2 years ago, Gallup's State of the American Workplace report got my attention. Let's see what you think about it. 70% of Americans feel negative about their jobs. 70%. Only 30% of employees are engaged and inspired at work. 52% of employees are present but not fully engaged. 18% are actively disengaged or worse. And as much as $550 billion, that's billion with a B, is lost in productivity due to those 18% actively disengaged employees. Well, you might or might not be surprised by this, but it sure does make a compelling case for paying attention to the quality of leadership, don't you think? Well, why leadership, you might want to ask? Well, in my experience and in my opinion and according to Gallup, it's because that's the #1 reason people feel negatively about their jobs and have become disengaged. You know, highly effective leaders simply don't have 70% of their employees unhappy in their jobs. They just don't. So in senior living, it could be a brighter picture, or it could be an even worse picture considering the high turnover rates throughout the industry. You're the best judges of that for your own facilities. I do expect, though, it's highly likely that there's more work to be done, and I bet you'd agree with me, even in the best-led organization. So to understand what's happening in the workplace, I'd like to start with this premise. Our behaviors and actions create an impact akin to a pebble or a boulder landing on a lake. Everything within the lake reacts to the impact, and the ripples grow and spread until they reach the boundaries of their influence. And you know, that's how it is with each of us, regardless of our intent. I'm sure you've seen this in nature, and now think about it at work. Over decades of observing leaders and being a leader and coaching leaders, I've noticed many things. These 8 insights pretty much sum up what I teach and write about. We're going to cover each one, and I'll give you some practical advice along the way. I'm just going to give you a list first, and then we'll go into them one at a time. Insight #1. Knowing is the easy part. Doing is the hard part. This is where the rubber hits the road. Second, leading people is messy. I know you know that. Yes, we really are 24-hour human beings with 24-hour lives. Third, leadership is a discipline, not an accident or by the way. We actually have to learn how to lead, even if we're naturally good at it. Fourth, leadership and individual contribution require opposite skill sets and motivations. You got to trust me on this one. I'll explain why this is true when we get there. Fifth, leading is all about relationships because everything we do at work involves other people one way or another. And sixth, learning the soft skills is hard, and it requires that we pay attention, keep learning, and then use good interpersonal skill sets. The truth is, you can't lead well without them. That's a fact. Seventh, most change efforts fail, I'm sorry to say, and they don't have to. I'm happy to say. So let's not waste time and money when we can do so much better. And finally, our eighth insight is that leaders create and destroy workplace cultures. Your team and your part of the business is what I like to call your responsibility pond. And everything going on within your ecosystem ripples out from you and back to you. No kidding, no fooling. So that's the overview. Now let's look at the 8 insights one at a time. Insight number 1, knowing's the easy part, doing's the hard part. Some of the best intended and least effective leaders I've known have read dozens of books and even more articles on leadership. They know the buzzwords, they know the latest trend in strategic planning, they might even know the best way to build a new org chart. Well, having all this information in your brain is one thing. It's great. And integrating it into your behaviors and making it real is a much bigger challenge. And that's because changing our behaviors is one of the most difficult feats known to humankind. I mean, really? When was the last time you tried to change a behavior? If it weren't possible, though, no one would quit smoking, overcome fear of flying, or stop interrupting, and so on. We can change our behaviors when we choose to. It's also important that we know exactly what we want to do and how we want to be. When we have high clarity and high commitment, so both of those, high clarity and high commitment, we can succeed at pretty much anything. So once you combine knowing and doing, you're well on your way. As you're learning and doing, though, please be gentle with yourself. Don't expect perfection, and by all means, stop and celebrate your success. Because each step, no matter how small, gets you closer to your goal. So here are some tips about this insight. First one is practice. Choose one thing you know you need to improve, change, or enhance. Not 10. Just one at a time. Then make a plan. Write down a list of things that will help you be successful with your goal. Think about what resources and support you're going to need and how are you going to get what you need. Because you can, if you put your mind to it. I know you can. Also consider what might derail you and how you're going to overcome those things, because stuff will get in the way. Then visualize. Make time for quiet moments. I do mean quiet. That means without email, without cell phones, no TV, and even other people. Purposefully make time on a regular basis to be alone. Think about when was the last time you were alone for quiet thoughts and thinking. Even small amounts add up. Do this so you can take time to imagine and feel the change you want to make and begin to integrate it. Practice more then. Don't let any side trips or missteps stop you. Keep at it, because there are going to be side trips and missteps. Still, keep at it. If one way doesn't work for you, well then try another one. Just please don't give up. So let's talk about insight number 2 now, which follows kind of nicely on this one. Leading people is messy. I know you know this, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. People are and always will be unpredictable, and each person's unique. So that means that leading people is complex. It's fun, it's interesting, frustrating, and messy. But life happens, you know it. Of all people, you know it probably better than most. And it's full of triumphs and tragedies, any of which can happen to any one of us at any time. We can't predict surprises, right? So human emotions that show up at work, yeah, they can be confusing, and they can be disturbing. You know, like, what if someone's crying in my office or acting threatening, or what if someone's always sarcastic about someone else, and so on and so on. Well, personalities, motivations, and behaviors are all over the map. And that's what makes life interesting. It also makes it messy. And leaders have to be ready for just about anything and everything. So, like it or not, people are 24-hour thinking, feeling creatures. They can and often do behave differently than our assumptions or even our expectations of them. Sometimes we say and think normal is what we are. But of course, that's not true. Every person has their own flavor of normal. And I know you know this too, but just want to remind you that personal values drive decisions, theirs and yours. Those values generate emotions. Emotions often show up in our behaviors. And it's a knee bone connected to the thigh bone kind of thing. All of this fits together. I'm sure you know that emotions, both happy ones and not so happy ones, are contagious and often spread faster than the common cold. I know you know this, especially within the ecosystem of a facility. You can see it every time. Emotions leak out no matter how much some people think that feelings are supposed to be kept out of the workplace. Men and women, young and old, any personality. The idea that we can keep feelings on the other side of the door is a lot of bunk. Besides, we want people to have feelings at work when it suits us, right? We want them to be loyal, grateful, happy, ethical, engaged, and we want them to be kind to the people they work with and for. These are all feeling-based behaviors, so really it's just the inconvenient feelings that we'd like people to leave at the door, and it just doesn't work that way. So here are some helpful tips. First, identify your triggers. Zero in on one of the few or the few key things that people do or even don't do that really bothers you and triggers negative emotions in you. When you identify them, then really think about the root cause. Dig under that, of why they bother you. And when you know that, you can begin to address it from a leader's perspective, not just a personal one. I think you might notice that your triggers are usually tied back to your own personal values. Take a look at that. Make sure you're leading for the right reasons. And I really do mean this, because sometimes we just end up in that spot, and we need to be doing it for the right reasons. Leading is one of the most rewarding jobs anyone can have. If, and only if, leading is joyful for you. I actually said joyful, and I say this to people all the time, and I hope it gets your attention too, because it's not good for you if you dread the messiness of leading people most of the time. It's really far better to go out there and do something you really enjoy and where you feel authentic. Otherwise, you'll make yourself sick and everyone else miserable. The human and business costs are far too high, and really, it's just not worth it. Address, don't fear emotions. I'd suggest you think about emotions as helpful markers and signs telling you things you need to know. You know why? Because they are, and they do. Since emotions are ever present, addressing them appropriately is the leader's job. Failing to address issues that arise is failing to lead. And finally, what can you do? Here's another idea. Hope you like it. Embrace the whole package. What that means is continuously remind yourself that just like you, each person you lead has a life story. They have a personality, talents, abilities, ambitions, and skills. And on the flip side, each person has fears and worries and authority issues and more. So get to know your people. Learn what motivates and inspires them. Each one will be different. And also learn what turns them off. Then embrace each person for who they are and help them become who they want to become. To help you do that, it's useful to pay attention to insight number 3. Leadership is a discipline, not an accident, and not by luck. Those of you who already lead other people may have come to your position because you were already a good leader or you learned to be a good leader, and were recognized for that. I'm still willing to wager that you, along with the rest of us, probably got your first leadership assignment and maybe even subsequent leadership roles because you were really good at something else, or just happened to be in the right place at the right time. If you are not a leader of other people yet, it'd be wise to make sure you know what you're getting into before you leap into it. People often find themselves in leadership roles because their specific job knowledge, performance, and technical skills were exemplary or at least pretty good. The thing is, being good at other things does not automatically equate to being good at leading people. Leading is both an art and a science, and it takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of determination and practice to do it well. We're taught how to follow from an early age, and perhaps even how to play well with others. But rarely, if ever, are we taught or expected to learn how to lead people. We know for sure, you and I both know for sure, that highly effective leaders get much better results. There's no debate about this, and it's just plain common sense. So what can you do? Well, let's start by getting humble, becoming aware, and being conscious. So let's put it this way. Being top frog in your pond does not automatically mean you're the best, the smartest, the wisest, or the most skilled at everything. It just means for sure that you have the loudest croak. What's important is to have all the other frogs want to follow you. Pay attention to your impact and be conscious of your behaviors and decisions that will affect all the others in your pond. Next, get feedback and learn. You need to find out where your strengths and challenges are, and you need to know that, not guess it, both in your skill set and in your behaviors. So then take in that information and make a plan. Good leaders never arrive or finish learning. It's a lifelong journey. You know it, I know it. Get the skills you need and practice them a lot. Once you know where your challenges are, well, then tackle them. You might find a skilled coach, perhaps a mentor. Take a good course in the topic area you want to learn. There are lots of ways to practice. And in all cases, apply what you learn. Of course, practicing leadership skills is really no different than learning anything else new. The skills might be different, but you still have to try, mess up, and try again, just like any other skill set. And then you need to integrate what you learn so you can do this thing we call leadership really well. Get more feedback. Once you've zeroed in on what you need to learn and you've made the effort, practice and integrate your learning. And then enlist trusted colleagues, people you know, friends, family, whoever it is that you trust, to provide you with really an honest assessment. Are you making progress? Otherwise, you're in danger of falling right back into your old habits. And finally, please stay humble. Having high ego, self-importance, or arrogance around leadership will make you look like a fool at best and certainly won't build trust or engagement with your staff. For example, if you think you have to use your authority to get things done more than 10% of the time, you're relying on your title, not on your influence or your leadership skills. I'd like you to think about that. So, this moves us nicely into insight number 4. Leadership and individual contribution require opposite skill sets and motivations. You might wonder what that means. Well, here's what I mean. Think about when you were a kid. From the day you were born, all the applause has been about what you have done well, not what we have done well. Fast forward to where you are today, I think you'll agree that for most of your life, your personal performance generated the lion's share of your positive rewards and probably your negative consequences. It wasn't a group of people. It was you, and more you. That's the way it happens for all of us. It's normal. It's natural. And it's very different from leadership. The skills and attributes required to successfully lead people are entirely opposite those required to be a successful individual contributor. Consider this. Knowing how to play an instrument requires one skill set. knowing how to create harmony from a symphony of people, all of them, playing many different instruments requires additional, different, and yes, opposite skill sets. The violin player is responsible for just his performance and succeeds when he plays well regardless of what anybody else is doing. The conductor, on the other hand, is responsible for getting the best from each person in their instrument so that every person together will produce magnificent music. The individual parts don't matter as much if they don't come together well. They're all important, but they have to come together well to make that orchestra sound right. She and they succeed only when the entire orchestra succeeds, right? So for some people, this transition from individual contributor to leader may come easily. For most of us, though, it's an unexpected and dramatic change. It's your responsibility now as a leader whether or not you received any training. Really, it doesn't matter whether you received any. It's still your responsibility to manage people and to gracefully navigate all those new responsibilities with skill and grace. So really, leading other people is both an intellectual and an emotional seismic shift that's going to quickly separate effective leaders from ineffective ones. You know this from your own observations, I'm sure. So sooner or later, it will catch up with you like lava flowing from a volcano, and it's far better to get ahead of it than to have it erupt all around you. You might be wondering how you can make this shift successfully, especially if you're already in a leadership role. So here are some tips. Change your mindset to we versus me. Here's some things you can do. Take a look at your emails. I mean, just even over the last day or two. Presentations and even your verbal language. Check out how many times you say I or my versus we, our, and us in your language. Consider how many of your decisions are unilateral versus collaborative. That doesn't mean we have to have consensus for everything. It just look at how you're making your decisions. And finally, think about how important is it to you that you're right and that you win arguments with your staff, or that you just get to the right answer no matter how you get there. Get out of the weeds and lead. Learn how to delegate well and develop your people. Delegation does take time, I know that, and attention. Think of what you're going to gain, though. It's task and person specific, I know that, but once it's really truly delegated and delegated well, you can go on to other things. Being an effective leader means trusting others to do their best, not acting like the only way to do the best thing is your way. Micromanaging is an individual contributor's disease when you're in a leadership role. And honestly, all it does is telegraph mistrust. Take responsibility for your pond. No matter how big or small your work group or team is, as the leader, you're 100% responsible for the state of the culture within it. It's not just about your results. It's also about how you've led your people to those results. And lastly, invest in your team, because without your people, there is no team. It must be a priority of yours to make the time to grow and maintain high-functioning teams with healthy group dynamics, engaging each and every person, and building trust and synergy. This investment will save you a ton of time and a heap of trouble. And it's truly what I call a pay now or pay later deal. And that thought takes us right into insight number 5. Leading is all about relationships. So let's get to the heart of the matter. You know what? If no one's following you, you aren't leading, period. You can manage all kinds of tasks that might involve schedules and money and projects and budgets and all that stuff. And yet everything you do with your staff and your residents and families involves relationships. How well those relationships work has a lot to do with how much trust is at the center of each one of them. So the question is not if we'll have relationships at work. The question is, what will the quality of those relationships be? You play such a critical role in your ecosystem, and what I keep calling your responsibility pond, because this is where your leadership ripples are most strongly felt. As a leader, you create, model, and nurture the norms, culture, and environment that everybody who lives and works in your pond will experience. The fact is, you can sustain and strengthen them, or you can weaken and sicken them. Understanding this is a huge wake-up call for many leaders, and in my opinion, not a minute too soon. It is true, you're either part of the solution or part of the problem. When you are the leader, you need to be part of the solution. And you know, it's not enough to be really, really smart. Emotional intelligence matters a heck of a lot if you want healthy relationships. You and I both know that bad leaders can do a lot of damage. And good leaders can accomplish incredible feats with their teams. I truly in my heart, or I wouldn't be doing this work, believe that most of us would choose the latter as our legacy. So here are some thoughts about what you can do. Create a healthy culture on purpose. You need to learn about what's going on right now, the current dynamics within your culture, to determine what is and isn't working. If you need help, get help, including gathering the wisdom that's in the hearts and minds of your own staff. Then build trust on purpose. Make it your job to reach out to people where trust is less than you'd like it to be. Consider personalities, what motivates each person, and prepare to have an open, graceful, and honest dialogue. I'd like to see you walk around a lot. Walking around sends the message that you're approachable, and it also helps you do a sniff test, as what I call a sniff test about your culture, because you'll pick up all kinds of things as you're walking around. It helps you to become more accessible to people too, and to recognize them, or be able to recognize them and their work in a really much more informal way than in a meeting or in writing even. It's worth making the trip part of your routine, and it works very well as long as you're not using it to find people doing things wrong. Okay, that's not okay, because then people will be afraid of you. Model how you want others to behave. People pay very close attention to what you do, even more than what you say. So it really does mean walking your talk and living your values. This flows really nicely into insight number 6. Learning the soft skills is hard. You know, I've noticed over the years that adults tend to resist learning or relearning good interpersonal and social management skills, leaders included. These skills involve thinking about relationships, behaviors, and even emotions rather than impersonal or technical tasks. And that is hard work. Most of us know that we need to engage and energize employees to build trust and to communicate well to get good results. Well, to get all that good stuff, we have to do all that hard, soft stuff. It's really that simple. And mastering leadership skills is not rocket science. Actually, I think it's a lot harder, precisely because it's more qualitative than quantitative, and because we are leading people, not machines. I want to reassure you, though, that even if you don't have all of these skills, you can learn them. It takes determination, practice, and feedback, but nothing's beyond you. I'm not telling you anything new. I know I'm not. I'm just reminding you that you really need to be good at soft skills and grow your emotional intelligence competencies to be the most effective leader you can be. And when you do this, your staff, your residents, and families will thrive, which of course flows right to your bottom line. And we all care about our bottom line, whether it's money, reputation, whatever. Here are some suggestions about where to focus right now. And you might notice all of these suggestions will strengthen emotional intelligence competencies. Listen more than you talk. Here's a fact. Here's a fact. You're not leading if you're not listening, and you need to listen at least twice as much as you talk, or you're going to miss a lot. You're going to make mistakes you could have prevented, and you're going to lose opportunities you could have had. Next, increase staff engagement. The wisdom about how to run your facilities is truly on your teams and within your staff. When they are engaged, they and you win. When they're not engaged, they and you lose. It's a real simple equation. All right, make improving your dialogue skills a priority. The first 3 dialogue skills to master are deep listening, constructive feedback, and conflict management. If you do nothing else, really get good at those. And then finally, take a good leadership course. If you have never had formal leadership training that covers at least the skills we've been talking about today, I urge you to make the investment and do it for yourself and do it for your people. If you've had a comprehensive leadership training experience, and I hope that would have lasted, you know, many days over a period of time, then revisit what you learned regularly and recommit to practicing and applying what you learned. Because otherwise, you just had a time away, and it doesn't really help you or them. So doing all of these things may result in some changes in your thinking and your perceptions, which leads us to Insight 7. So, unfortunately, most change efforts do fail. The good news is they don't have to. Do you know that Charles Darwin actually said, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." What we've heard forever is a phrase, survival of the fittest, survival of the fittest. I'm sick of hearing that because it's in fact inaccurate, and it's somebody else's phrase that they made up. It's not Darwin's. It becomes a justification for the end justifies the means, and it's an excuse for a lot of bad behaviors. So how does this relate to change? Well, it is indeed those who are the most responsive to change who will survive and thrive. The problem is that people are naturally inclined to be resistant to change, particularly, and I'm sure you are aware of this, when it's top down and when they aren't consulted about changes that affect them. I'm sure that's true for you. It's also true for your people. The wasted human energy and other resources that go down the big black sinkhole of most change initiatives is truly astounding. So, do we learn from our mistakes? Well, too often, not a lot, and nearly always, not enough. Leaders lead change. There's no getting around it, and how well you do that part of your job will make or break your organization. Really, it will, and maybe even you. The painful truth is change efforts fail in most organizations. Are you ready for this? About 70% of the time. And for some, that's a good day. We know this from our own experiences, and all the research tells us the same thing. It's really quite astounding. The status quo is a powerful, almost surreal stranglehold on people and organizations. We think and say we're open to new ideas and to changes, but often it's not true. And the number one reason it's not true is because people resist them. And the number one reason people resist them is because our life experiences have shown us that too many people with authority over our work make lousy decisions based on lousy information that end up with lousy results. And we don't have a voice. That's really important. So there are smarter ways to lead change initiatives that go well and actually stick. Here are a few. You need to have a change process, a plan, a vision, who's going to be involved, and then use it. Make sure your protocols and planning process around every change are known, that they're clear and reasonably predictable, and that all the right questions are being answered transparently. People want to know the truth. Then empower and engage those affected by the change process. People need to know what the change is, who's involved, how will it affect them, and how and when will it happen. They need to be able to share their ideas and concerns, because people resist change when they feel they have had no voice, as I mentioned earlier, especially when it's going to impact their lives. No matter how small those changes may seem to you, changes that impact other people bother them if they don't have a voice a lot more. Okay, pull, don't push change. Here's another way to think about that. Ask, don't tell. Pull wisdom from the group. Pull wisdom from the group rather than pushing change down people's throats. The wisdom's there. You just need to gather it. To ignore this is to do so at your own peril. Really it is. Even when a change comes from outside your pond and is imposed on you, it's still your job to navigate the change within your group and with your people in a way that's aligned to your culture and your values. That includes celebrating success, by the way. And then finally, communicate, communicate. I use the rule of 7. I like to tell people at least 7 times in several different ways what I want to make sure they hear. I tell them what's happening, how they can be involved, what to expect, where to get information, and so on and so on. I recommend that leaders over-communicate to everyone involved and err on the side of having people say, oh, I know already, versus, I didn't know that, they never told me anything. Remember, it's what people hear and understand that matters, not what you say or even write. So share your message and information many ways and many times, all the way through the process, including at the end. All of what we've talked about leads us to insight number 8. Leaders create and leaders destroy workplace cultures. There's just no way around it. I love this quote from John Mackey of Whole Foods Markets. If you are lucky enough to be someone's employer, then you have a moral obligation to make sure people do look forward to coming to work in the morning. This has been my litmus test of healthy cultures for several decades now. I'm so happy someone famous finally said what I've been thinking for so long, and it's so true. Indeed, you have responsibility for your workplace culture when you're the leader. You're the #1 role model. You're the one who needs to create the model and support a workplace environment where the intended culture will thrive and your desired results will occur. It does take a lot of work to build and sustain a positive and productive work culture. It does. I know that. And it can take just a heartbeat for one ineffective, bad, or lousy leader to destroy it. So you want it to be deep and you want it to be true. The leadership revolution I want to see in my lifetime would mean that we are each committed to building healthy ecosystems within our workplaces. So here's some things we can do to make that happen. Know that the culture is your responsibility. All you need to do is remind yourself to think responsibility pond in your visual clue. We'll zoom in, and there it'll be, and you'll remember it. And first, do no harm. First, do no harm. What kind of workplace do you want to spend your time and life force within? For those of you operating in senior living facilities, it's also important to keep in mind that you're working in your resident's 24-hour home. The residents aren't living in your 8-hour workplace. Articulate your mission, vision, and values. Make sure they align with each other. Many organizations and teams actually forget to do this, which is really surprising and a problem. Because forgetting to do this can make your culture flounder like a ship without a rudder. You may get somewhere, but probably not where you wanted to go unless you get lucky, and boy, I wouldn't count on that. Assess, correct, assess. Paying close attention to your culture is a 24/7, 365 deal. Cultures are like the air you breathe, and it permeates your pond. So when you're the leader, you need to continuously check to make sure it's safe, healthy, and a place people want to be, and where they can do their best work. Really, the alternative doesn't have a happy ending. And then finally, celebrate your people and success. Any healthy culture, no matter where you are or what work you do, celebrates individuals, teams, and the entire organization whenever they can. And I mean for real. I don't mean, just doing it to do it. I mean for real reasons. So when anyone does something spectacular, or even delivers an act of grace, the rest of the organization is richer for it and says so, one way or another. Well, there you have it. 8 leadership insights to ponder. Of course, there are many more insights woven into this fascinating tapestry of leadership, and you can learn more from the link to the 3 free video chapters of my Leading with Impact online course, and you'll receive the Ask Roxi newsletter where I answer readers' questions every month and focus on 1 or 2 hot leadership topics. You're also going to have access to this webinar through the Senior Living Smart email that you'll all get sent after we're done today. My goal is to help you be the leader you want to be, and of course the leader your people deserve. If I can help you, please let me know. I believe we have some time to answer questions now, so I want to hear from you, and if you have questions, please send them in because I'm going to turn it over to Renee now, and we'll see what you have to say. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Roxy. What a nice presentation. It was really, really informative, and I appreciate all the time and energy you put into it. We have some nice questions for you. First of all, are there good leadership classes that you would recommend? And if so, do you offer these type of courses?
Um, yes, there are. So I'm biased, I'll be honest. I believe in a holistic, comprehensive leadership course. I've done them live for many, many years, 20 or more, as it turns out. And a live course is great because you're with a group and there's a lot of interaction. There are upsides and downsides to doing it with an intact group, and also, or doing it with people you don't know, because you learn from each other. So it's good either way. I offer my course online on my website. I also have a facilitator guide, blended learning for groups. So, and I mean, Ken Blanchard has stuff out there, and the Center for Creative Leadership has stuff. A lot of them are really expensive. I'm trying to make things accessible to people, so I've tried not to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. What can I do if I want to create a great culture, but my boss doesn't get it or want to do it?
Well, yeah, I've heard this question many times, and here's my answer. It's your pond. No matter what, the group that you're responsible for, you and they can create your own microclimate, so to speak. And also try to influence up, manage up as much as you can. Maybe help your boss see what your boss needs to see. And in the meantime, take control of your own team and your own culture.
Okay, good, thank you. If I've given feedback to someone already and it hasn't worked, what should I do next?
Well, I always ask people two questions around this. The first one is how long ago was it? The second one was, what was the method that you used to give the feedback? If the method was really good, then I suggest doing it again, and even including that we've talked about this before, and if it matters to you, and I imagine you wouldn't have brought it up if it didn't matter to you. So let's see if your skill set's good first, though, because most people have a pretty rusty skill set on doing constructive feedback well, including the most important thing to do, which is to convey positive intent right up front and have a real positive motivation about why you're sharing this information.
Okay, great. This is a question asked by a couple people actually, and any books that you would recommend to help them understand leadership more, or books that are your favorite on leadership?
Yeah, I would. There's some kind of seminal books out there that I think are really important for everyone to read. One of them is Primal Leadership with Daniel Goleman and a couple other authors. Mm-hmm. Another one is I'm sure many people, if not most, have heard of Good to Great with Jim Collins. That's really about level 5 leadership and humility, and still really getting the job done. In fact, getting a better job, much better job done. And Peter Senge has a field guide which has lots of authors in it and lots of different things that might relate to different situations that I think is pretty terrific. And then, of course, there's Lead Like It Matters Because It Does, that is coming out in October. So.
Absolutely. Good. Well, you definitely have to include yours, I would hope, as well. We work with a lot of women in our facility as a staff, family members, and residents. Is there something we should pay attention to because of the gender imbalance? This is a good question.
Yeah, the experience that I have in heavily weighted gender in one way or the other is that sometimes we lose the perspective of what the other gender might bring in. And so that's one thing. The second thing is that cultures that have a lot of women in them tend to want to be cultures that want to be more collaborative in their problem solving. They care about each other, and want to have informal relationships that bind them and that build trust. If you don't allow for that in a culture that's dominated by by a gender of women, you've got a problem. The flip side of that is if you had a culture that was dominated by men and you were trying to do that, they would have a problem. So you need to just appreciate the fact that there really are different needs and different ways the brain works and all of that with women, and to respect it and honor it.
Okay, great. Thank you. When change comes from somewhere else like regulations, I don't feel like I have much control over the change. So what do you suggest I do?
I talked about this a little bit in the webinar, and I just will really reinforce the issue of pulling the wisdom from your group about what you in your own pond can do with, okay, something's come in, like it's parachuted in to your workspace, and it's going to affect you, and it may even affect people's jobs or the way you do work, whatever. You need to problem solve together, because it's going to affect people, especially regulations. They're going to affect a lot of people, and they could affect your residents too and the families. So it's just really important to get the wisdom from the group to say, here's what's happened. We need to comply by XYZ. This is what they say complying is like. What can we do to make that easier on ourselves, on our residents, our families? What can we do to make this a smooth transition and navigate the change, as opposed to whining about it, which a lot of us like to do. I do from time to time, and acting like a victim or being critical. I work with an organization right now that has had tremendous changes in the state regulations around disabilities, and they're just mindless. It's like it's an incredible bureaucratic mess, and what they've had to do is just get really smart together about, they can't do anything about it.
Okay, great. I have a few more questions, which thank you everyone for keep sending them in. It's great. Soft skills, listen more, constructive feedback. What is number 3?
Oh, it was deep listening.
Yeah.
Constructive feedback, and conflict resolution skills.
Okay, great. Okay, so now that I know, please elaborate a little bit more on soft skills and where to learn them. Sorry about that. There was a follow-up to that question.
Okay, so the soft skills I'm talking about are simply interpersonal skills. How we communicate with people, how we deal with the everyday stuff that comes up. Sometimes it's happy stuff and sometimes it's not happy stuff. So learning the soft skills really is not difficult. There's so much on the internet. There's so many courses. You could take courses at a continuing ed class. They're just the resources. Just Google any one of them, and you'll find tons of resources. The issue isn't are the resources there. The issue is are they good ones? And so you'd want to check that out with people that are evaluating it. And the second thing is, how are you going to apply it? Practice is the number one thing. Really deciding, okay, I know I interrupt a lot at meetings. I need somebody to help me give me feedback when that's happening. I'm going to go, really take this 5-hour course or 3-hour course on deep listening skills or active listening skills or whatever, and then I'm going to actually practice them. Practice is what really gets you there, because most of us know how to do this stuff, we've just forgotten.
Right. Good advice. Another question is, in general terms, how receptive is the senior living market to your ideas?
Well, Senior Living Smart is very receptive, and I'm hoping their members are receptive. Here's what my experience has been. The very first thing people say is, we don't have any money for training, and then they just shut down, as opposed to thinking about creative ways that they could maybe work together, or collaborate and get the skill sets for all their staff. There just seems to be this scarcity mentality that keeps people from doing stuff that they know they need to do and know they want to do. I found it very resistive, actually, and so I'm hoping that that will change, because I think it has to change, because your industry is going through massive pressures and change over, and you know what's going to happen over the next 10 years. So if leadership isn't where it needs to be in the senior living industry, we're in trouble.
Good.
I'm trying to fix that, help that.
Sure. We don't have a lot of money for training, so how can we get what we need to improve our soft skills and relationships?
Well, we just talked
You
about
kind of
that.
hit that already, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. I had several people ask questions about the soft skills, so I'm sorry about that one. That one came a little later. So, as of now, there are no more questions. Roxy, thank you so much for your insight on leadership. It was very engaging, and I hope all the listeners will walk away with a lot of great ideas and things to do for their own organization. Again, I want to recommend you look at the screen and see the exclusive offer for all the attendees, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. It was a nice crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roxy.